This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Lori Marini. And welcome to the show. This is the first time we're talking to you tonight, and we're glad to have you on the podcast. This is going to be episode 902 of the Phantom Electric Ghost Show. We've been around since 2016. And that's from our Apple podcast. We're tracking it from there. And we always want to have people on the show talking to people all over the world. We're also on a platform called Newsly. You can see the little icon up there. And if you use the coupon code GHOST, you get 1 month free premium subscription. We are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. We will be on there later tonight. So again, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's interesting from all the world. And what we want to focus on tonight is how do you keep a positive mindset? So maybe as the first question is like, well, what's your take on that? What's the best way to do that?
Oh, I love this question. So, honestly, as people that are dealing with things, it's so easy to go into the negative. So for me, having a positive mindset truly changes the game of life. So positive mindset to me, that definition is that regardless of what's happening to you in life, you are still in the game. You're still thinking that there is hope. You think that there is a chance. You ignore the negative and you focus on the positive and what is possible.
Well, I think I try to ascribe to that because just your background, at age 27, I had a level 3 sarcoma. And it really was a big moment in my life where I totally changed who I am. The person you see now is not the 22-year-old version of myself. I was very shy. I wouldn't go in front of a camera. I wouldn't go on the mic. But after cancer, I beat it. I'm still here. I'm 55. I got it when I was 27 and I beat it. And it was just like this thing where I said, why should I be scared? Why should I be scared of anything? If I can beat that, I can put my mind to anything. And I got rid of the fear. And everybody fears everything, but certain things. But like, I think if you can get to a positive mindset of like, you could get into something like cancer and think it's gonna be the end. But for me, it was like the beginning.
Yeah. And I could attest to that too. So I got diagnosed in 2017 with breast cancer. And for me, it was a really trying time because I am a physician assistant in pathology, oncology. And I spent my entire career supporting other people with cancer. So when I found myself on the other side of the table, I honestly didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle it. I was completely overwhelmed. I knew, in a way, I kind of knew too much, and I didn't have a filter of what I would do for somebody else, right? People ask me all the time, like, hey, can you give me some information? And I always test to see how much do they really want to know. And with myself, I knew the morbidity, the mortality, the course of treatment. Like, I knew exactly what I was in for.
Too much. Maybe you knew too much.
Yeah. It was a blessing and a curse, right? Because I could really advocate for myself. And at the same time, I couldn't, sometimes ignorance is bliss. And so I didn't have that as an option. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I found when I had cancer and I was young, I was around a bunch of other under 30-year-olds, and I noticed there were people that kind of came out of my life because they couldn't handle the kind of heaviness of, oh, you're young and you got cancer, and they started thinking about their own mortality, or they couldn't handle it. Mm-hmm. So I actually lost some friends that just disappeared. And I've heard like people who are older that get cancer in their 70s or whatever, 60s, they've told me about the same type of thing happening. And did you experience that kind of thing where you lost some friends and you were like, wow, they couldn't handle it?
Yeah, I did. And ultimately, I have to say that for me, I was the one who blocked people out. It took me about a year to really share with people what I had going on. And it's because I felt that when I opened up to people, when I made myself really vulnerable to people, and I told them what was going on with me, that I was then consoling them instead of me trying to get some support for me. And I'm like, this doesn't work for me. This is not working.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
learned
you're not
really
getting
quick.
that.
Yeah, I learned really quickly who I could talk to about it, like openly, and who I just needed to be like, everything's good. I'm good for now, and just let it die. So in a way,
Mm.
I isolated myself from a lot of people, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's like it's hard to keep a positive mindset at first, but I think when you go through something like this, like crucible moment, because I've had the
Mhm.
podcast for a while and I've talked to people about all kinds of crucible moments, whether it's medical or something that happened in childhood or some kind of thing that trauma, how you handle trauma as a human being and like how you recover from it. I'm a musician and we play live and like how do you recover from a mistake? How do you recover when you like, or could you just stop and say start and stop, or you have like the ability to kind of on the go, kind of on the fly with your life? How do you recover? I
Yeah.
found it like I try to explain to people like when you're a musician and you kind of recover in that live scenario, well, it's not as heavy as recover from cancer, but like how do you take a moment and it's totally not like have it blow up to be bigger than it could be? You could actually manage it.
Yeah. And, for me, when moments like that happen to me, I'm just like, you know what? We're human and we do the best that we can. And then we just forgive and move on. Right. So whether it's done to me or if it's something that I'm not at my peak performance on something, I'm like, you know what? I gave it my best shot. And I feel that that was really the gift that I got from cancer. Like the gift of cancer was that not everything is so serious. Not everything is has to be perfect. That
Mhm.
we're allowed to be human and to make mistakes. And maybe the highlight of your day some days is like getting out of bed and actually making a bed and taking a shower, right? Like there
Yeah,
is some it doesn't always need to be huge moments
big
of
things.
greatness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I found is like the little win was getting up, you know?
Yeah.
The little win was, I had it on my back and I had to learn how to walk again. And,
Oh,
for months I wasn't able to walk and then I didn't know if I was gonna be able to walk. And then, I got and what I did is I set a goal. I started to build a mountain bike, during my radiation treatment. I bought a frame and I started building it, piece by piece, and said, when I'm done with all my treatment and they give me the okay, I'm going to use this bike to get back in shape. And
yeah.
I gave that to me as my goal. And it was hard. I first went out there, I had a hard time. I could barely go anywhere. I didn't really, couldn't go with the rest of the guys I used to go with. I had to kind of build up. It took a while, but it was a goal. And I thought it was like, I felt, at least I said something I felt was positive.
Yeah. And that is one of the key points on keeping a positive mindset. Like you need to figure out what you desire in life and just focus on that. Focus on the good of it. So a lot of times when my clients come to me and they're like, I don't have confidence. I don't, I'm depressed. I'm just not enjoying life. Then the first thing that I have them do is honestly journal their thoughts, like write everything down. Don't Nobody's going to read it. Nothing's off limits, the good and the bad of it, and like don't judge yourself for whatever they are. But it's a really great way on how you can manage your emotions, your thoughts around things. And then the second thing that I tell them is start with gratitude. List 3 to 5
Mm,
things every day of things that you are grateful for, things that are beautiful, things that are inspiring to you. Like, what makes you happy today? What's making you smile? And that is something that I took on when I was going through my treatment. I had a really rough time. So, journaling was my best friend, right? Things that I couldn't really share with other people. I used journaling for. And then to really keep myself in a positive mindset, I would literally go around the day taking pictures of things that I thought were beautiful and inspiring, that made me smile. And at the end of the day, I would do a post on Instagram share whatever picture resonated with me the most for that day, and then wrote about what my experience was when I, encountered whatever it is that I had a picture of. And it helped me reframe that, you know what, I'm not my cancer. I'm not the bad things that happened to me in life. And that I still am in charge of how my life is going to go, regardless of what's happening. And that really
Yeah, that's
supported
kind of
me.
like that's like art therapy. Being a musician, the hard thing for me during my cancer is like I'm a keyboardist, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I couldn't get all to all my synths that you see behind me. I couldn't use them. And so my songwriters, I said, well, I can keep on writing the poetry that is like lyrics. So
Yeah.
I just kind of journaled my experience with like, because I'm a creative. I said, well, I'm just gonna write like a poem or lyrics like every day
Yeah.
that I can, that I felt good, and I would do it. And when I said, when I get out of this bed, I'm gonna go then start writing songs to this stuff, and I did. I actually gave myself another thing to look forward to, and I think it's like that art therapy. Like you were talking about photography, and I've talked to people who are
Hmm.
painters, people who are other types of artists, and if you can still connect, to that art. I mean, I saw somebody who sometimes was getting like a brain surgery, and they were playing a violin during the surgery
Yeah.
because they actually kept them like they needed to see them doing that. There's some types of brain
Yeah.
surgery where you actually still want you to show that you can do things. So a
Yeah.
violinist was actually playing. I said, well,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to make sure that they're also not going to compromise that part for them. Right. So they want to make sure that they're still able to function. And I
For
love that.
functions.
Yeah. And one of, the thing that comes up for me too is that, hearing what you're saying and about using music as your therapy, we all need to find whatever outlet that is. And then we have to be really grateful and also celebrate, like, I took the hard first step to do something that I know that I love doing. A lot of times we don't give ourselves permission to be happy when something bad is happening in our life. We feel that
Yeah.
right, that we feel that we should be, you know very solemn and very, like,
Stoic.
demure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not the truth. Just because you're happy doesn't mean,
You're not
you know
serious.
yeah. Yeah, and I
You
think
could be
about this
serious and happy.
and I think about this with also bereavement, right? Like when we have a loss of a loved one, they're not going to want you to go for 20 years being unhappy. They're going to want you to live.
They want
So
you to move on. Most people
yeah,
would want you to move on with your life. They don't want you to be stuck in that moment. Are you
right.
gonna be stuck in that moment for the next, you know, phase of your life? I would think that they want you to move on.
Yeah, they
Most
want you
people
to be
would,
happy.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's hard because people put yourself in a box. You put yourself in that box. I run into artists like, well, my thing's melancholy. Like, well, you really want to stay in that for your whole career? That's all you want melancholia, or don't you want to try to experience other things? I'm very much in the cross genre, or cross, like thinking beyond what I'm comfortable with. And the thing is, like, you can get
Yeah.
stuck as an artist, like in the thing you know how to do. But what I find is, like, in order to move on, you have to challenge yourself into something that you're not comfortable doing, like learn another instrument that you're not good at.
Exactly.
Like you're good at piano, but learn bass. That you're not good at that, so you gotta start all over. There's nothing wrong with starting all over.
Right. And a lot of times when and that's the key point. That's the other thing of, like, when we go through a traumatic experience, most of us will reevaluate what we have going on in life. And the cool thing is that you get to choose again, okay, what do I want my life to look like? How do I want this to go? And one of the things that for me, it came to me that that's what really was what I needed to do when everybody kept calling me a survivor. And I'm like, for some
Mm.
reason, the word just really aggravated me. Like it didn't sit well with me. I'm like, I hate this word. This is terrible. I found it as a negative. So I was like, you know what? What is it? What is it about
Mm.
this word that I'm not liking? And when I recognized that my definition of it was that as a survivor, you're just going along and like playing whatever cards you're being dealt. And so my
Oh, you're not a
community,
fighter. Yeah, I get you.
yeah,
Compared to being like a fighter, if somebody says they're a fighter or that you're like, heroic, but when you're a survivor, like, well, something was done to you
yeah,
and you survived it. Not that you're like this heroic or adventurous or take a risk or, challenge yourself, a challenger. It doesn't sound, like that. Like those, so it has a negative connotation, whether or not people realize that you picked up it and you like it because you're like, that's not me. Because you look at
yeah,
you know who you are, and
yeah.
like that's not me. I'm not that person. Like that's not how you felt about the word.
Exactly. And so for me, my tribe and everyone that we assimilate together, we label ourselves as warriors. Because as a warrior, you go into battle prepared. You have the people behind you. You know, you have your armor on. So whether that's education, whether that's learning a new skill, whether that's like finding people like-minded or those that are going to support you, like you show up for that battle, as you said, and like you give it your all. And for
Hmm.
me, standing there, I couldn't do anything but succeed regardless of what that outcome was, because it was empowering. And when you're in an empowered state, the negative doesn't have a chance to play, because you could either be empowered or you could be in fear. You can't be in both at the same time.
Yeah, because I like a lot of people around me, like my family and my my parents. They were like total fear of like losing me, and they
Yeah,
had a different kind of perspective, and I was like, as I say, I'm in this fight. I'm just like in a battle, and I'm gonna win. And
yeah,
I just said because I have things I want to do because I had been,
exactly.
I hadn't gotten married, I hadn't traveled, I hadn't done a bunch of things I wanted to do, and so after the cancer, like I ended up I got married, had a
Mhm.
child with my wife, went to Japan for 2 years, and actually worked in Japan. And I had been a person that I was never going to travel, scared of traveling. I was going to get on a plane, go to Japan. But after the cancer, suddenly I was the person that was willing to go to Japan in 2004. And all these
Love it.
people were telling me, "Oh, you're going to have trouble there. You're going to have this and this doing. You just came out of cancer. Why are you going doing that? You can't get to your doctor." It's like, hey, I'm going to do something that I want to do. I wanted to travel.
I
And
love that.
it's like you just got to get outside of that fear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and
But
you have to live for the moment. You have to live in now. A lot of times people will live in a negative mindset because they're worried about what their future is going to be, and they lose out in the present moment and just enjoying where they are right now. It's like you have no idea what the future is going to hold for you. And so you're the only thing you're missing out on right now is being present with the people in your life, being, you know, present to the good that's in your life, to be able to, you know, love openly and like create goals that are going to push you forward and just really be at cause in your life. Um, it's really something that I wish that a lot of people would recognize. The amount of time that they spend worrying is the amount of
yeah.
time that they're not living.
Well, it's like a lot of things, I'm a Buddhist and I want to push Buddhism, but the idea is like we like to
Mhm.
actualize through chanting and verbalizing what our goals are. Like every day I chant and I do with Karma Sutra, and I set goals. It's like a list of things that I want to happen, and I verbalize it because it's kind of like this belief system. Like if you take something that's inside and you verbalize it, then you make it real. But if you just are in fear of those thoughts, you never vocalize them, you never tell anybody, you never act on them. You just keep on thinking it in your head and you never get out of it. like, so a lot of what I found
Mhm.
is like you're able to move forward when you actually, make it happen by by making it, real.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that I always tell people when they're like, I'm stuck, I don't know how to move, I don't know what to do, or I just feel like I'm just in a really bad space, then I tell them to get out into nature. So whether you're going to the beach or whether you're going for a hike, just really go and get some quiet time to be with your thoughts, to see what's happening in your
Mm,
world, and to just reconnect with the source, right? Like, I feel that grounding is so important. It's why the beach calms everybody, right? Having your feet, bare
yeah.
feet in the sand, right, really just supports you. And it is a physiologic change that is happening when you're doing that. You're absorbing the
Well, I
energy
think,
from
like,
the
you think
earth's
about
core.
yeah, well, I'm a big time well, I'm really into poetry, like a lot of the
Mhm.
Victorian poets. I like Longfellow and Hawthorne and the idea of, like, nature as a cathedral. I'm a mountain biker. I'm a
Yeah,
hiker, like, and I live in New Hampshire. So there's nothing but pines and all these trails everywhere. And I
yeah,
go out into these trails and it revitalizes me because of that kind of like the cathedral is nature. Because like if when I
yeah.
go out into the pines and I go mountain biking and I'm not like don't have my headset on, I'm not listening to like some kind of streaming service. I'm listening to the forest. I'm actually part of that. It's like when I think if you go out in nature and you do any of those things like hiking or walking
Mhm.
trails, and in mountain biking, you feel revitalized. Like I go out there I'm an IT guy, and I could sit around hours and every day, take time to go out and do a trail ride or a walk, because you need to get away from things and actually look at it again. Because the
Yeah,
people think if you just sit there for 10 hours straight, it's somehow you're going to get a different result. You get diminishing returns. You have to kind of give yourself a break. You're a human being. You need to be outside. you know.
definitely. And and I have to tell you, I mountain biked for the first time last year, and it was one of the best experience I ever had. I was actually in your neck of the woods. I was in Kingdom Trail in Vermont, and it
Oh
was one
yeah,
of it was amazing. I loved it. And one of the things that I found myself saying was, "Oh my goodness, I didn't do this stuff in my 20s and I'm now doing this in my 40s." And one, I was so proud of myself. Like, I overcame the
yeah. That's a
fear
hard
of,
thing.
like, go right. It's not easy. It's not easy. And
No,
so I was
some
really
people can't get over the fear because it's like you could. It's not like skiing. Like there's no
yeah,
snow to fall on.
no. No, and sometimes the trails are like this wide, right? And you're like, right. And it's one of those things that I think everybody should experience it once, because it definitely pushes you beyond your threshold, right? It pushes you out of your comfort zone.
You
And
can't
that's
be
all
really thinking of. You can't be thinking about your troubles. You're trying to stay on the bike.
exactly.
You're trying to
Exactly.
stay on the trail, and then it becomes like, how do I navigate this trail and get like be part of the scene? Like what I loved about it is it kind of feels like you're riding a horse or something. You're going through the woods and you're so in tune. Over I've been a biker for like 20 years, but it's this whole feeling. Back in the 70s, I was a kid riding the Schwinn bike, and then the mountain bike showed up. Like in the late 70s, like 79, 80. And I was one of these kids like, yeah, that's it. Like BMX, yeah, I can't really do that, but I can do this. And I just got into it with a bunch of friends, and we were like, wow, this is so cool
Yeah.
to be able to come down this creek bed, to
Yeah.
be able to go through this forest and get into trails you could never get to. They even hikers sometimes don't go where we go. And it was this communing with nature. And it wasn't like riding a motorized bike, because you have to challenge yourself to be able to get up the hill and get down the hill. It's a mind body thing.
It
You have to
is.
kind of not be scared. You have to get over some fear to be able to realize you can come down the creek bed, or you can
Yeah.
go, on this thing that's kind of steep. It challenges you and gets you to like in your life. I feel I kind of translated some of it to like getting over the fears that you could have in everyday life. The fight or flight fears that everybody has. you kind of need to get out there in nature and get yourself into something so you can learn how to challenge yourself.
Yeah, and it's like, in the moment when you are fearful of something, it's like we need to ask ourselves the questions why. Like, okay, why is this bothering me? Why am I afraid of this? And then keep going down the whys to like 5 different levels. Keep asking why, so that way you could get to the source of what you're really concerned about. And a lot of times people realize that it's not even what they think it is, it's something totally different. And that is the one thing that I love doing as a coach, to have people
Hmm.
get that profound awareness of like, look, it has nothing to do with this. You're really going back to a conversation maybe of like when you were 5, like, right? You never know really where your ideas are stemming from, because we don't give ourselves enough time in that quiet space to discern that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people got so much going on. Part of the problem with like being plugged in with your
Hmm.
phone and your watch and your iPad and all these things, you're constantly getting pinged, and then you
Hmm.
can't focus because you got too many things coming in.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about kind of chanting or going out and mountain biking, whereas I can declutter my mind of all that stuff and like turn off the phone, don't get the messages, focus on kind of like, having a kind of spiritual thing. Like I said, like nature is the cathedral. If you allow that to kind of come in, then you can get rid of all those cobwebs in your head or all those things that are kind of jumbled around. Is like, and start to really focus on what do you really want. A
Yes.
lot of people don't do what they want; they do what other people expect them to do. And then you
Exactly.
got to figure out, like, do you really want to do that, or do you be honest and say, I finally want. I think the great resignation was because people said, "Oh, I got time to think,"
Hmm.
during the lockdown. And then when you start to think, why was I doing that 2 hour commute? Why was I on the plane Monday to Thursday? Why was I doing that?
Yeah.
Do I really want to do that? Maybe I don't.
Yeah, definitely. And that was one of the biggest things for me, that I used to live in a someday world. Well, someday I'll move to the beach. Someday, right? And I'll never forget, after after getting diagnosed, I was working in Boston, and it was one of those cold winter days, and I had my parka to my ankles, I had my boots on, my hat, my scarf, and all you saw was like this part of me. And a wind gust came as I was walking to the tee, and I'm like, why do I live here? Why do I live here? And that was a catalyst for me of like, why do I live here? And so, as you said earlier,
Mhm.
goals are the most important thing. Living in the Sunday of life really robs you of what's possible. And so, one of the other things that I really like to have my clients do is like write down, list 50 things that you can have in your life. And some of them you can attain right now, some of them are really like reach goals, but make a list of what comes to mind. Make a list of like things that you would love, and get like really specific, you know, um, as to what they are. So, like, a lot of times people will be like, oh, I wish I had $1 million. Well, what does that $1 million give you? Like, write that down,
Yeah,
and
what are
then
you
you'll
trying to
see.
get with it? Yeah, what are you trying to get with it?
Yeah. Like, are you looking for, to pay your house off? Are you looking to send your kid to school? Like, what is it that that money is going to give you? And keep listing it down. And you will see over time, because you have an awareness on what you're trying to accomplish, your focus is going to go there. The universe is going to give it to you. And any negative thoughts that surround that whole thing don't even have time to come into play about it, because your focus is now no longer on the woes me or what you don't have right now. You reprogram your brain to go ahead and start paying attention to, like, okay, well, if I want $1 million, how am I going to make it? Okay, so if I want to send Jimmy to school, like, what school do I want to send him to, and how much is that going to cost me, and where's that going to go? And it's really training your brain to keep moving forward and not living in that someday world.
Yeah, I think as like one of the things being a musician is we try to like imagine all kinds of things in our songs, and then to have, go get out of the fear of presenting it to the world. And
Yeah,
one of those things is like when you finally decide that you're going to present a song as a musician, that you're going to be a singer songwriter, you have to get over that fear of, oh, will people like it? And I knew a lot of musicians when I was 17. They never really got over that point where they didn't want to present. They like, I'm not good enough. I'm not Jimmy Page. I'm not Hendrix. I'm not this. And so they kept on giving themselves the reasons why they wouldn't do it. And then you get the people who finally make the choices like, I'm going to do it. So I knew the guys that were really good, but they didn't believe they were good. And I'm like,
right.
wow, that's a shame because they're not willing to show what they can do. And it's all in their head. It's like, fine, because there were people that weren't as good as them that were willing to go in front of people, and it's how much confidence you have. And you'd
Yeah.
be
And
surprised. It's like, well, technically this guy's better, but he's not willing to get in front of you people.
yeah, and sometimes it's about courage, right? Our confidence comes from taking that bold step forward. So you may not feel like you're at the level where you need to be, but taking that action is what's going to give you the confidence. And so that's why, like, going back to the whole journaling point, right? When you just free write in your journal, or like you're saying, like write songs and allow that creativity to flow from you, you're going to identify your limiting belief. You're going to identify, like, oh, I don't think I'm smart. I don't think I'm attractive. I don't think I'm good with money. Whatever that conversation is for you, that you may not have covered yet, uncovered yet, I should say.
Yeah, I think
And
what happens is a lot of people they don't really self-reflect. They might
mhm,
think they have it in their head and they have their fears, but they don't take the time to actually kind of list it out like you're saying. Like if you start to actually look, they like a Victorian poet idea is this looking glass. Well, what does that mean? You look in the looking
right,
glass and you start writing, and maybe you're not Keats, you're not Lord Byron, you're not Wordsworth, you're not, William Blake. But the idea was that, like they looked inside themselves and then they
right.
started to write all these things. And it started to, William Blake was interesting because he put everything on acid etchings. He drew pictures with his poems. And they got he was never famous in his time, but he felt his poetry was so powerful, he put it into etchings that was like permanent. And so
Mm-hmm.
when they were found, the songs of innocence and experience, they were found as these pieces of art that have poetry in them.
I
And
love
that's
that.
how, he got discovered because he had a belief, at least to the point where I think this should be permanent and people will find it. And
Yeah,
and it became so that he became one of the greatest Victorian poets that wasn't known in his time.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of times too, right? He was providing a, like, what I hear from that, what's coming up for me is that, like, he was providing something for people to really take in, embrace, right? To reflect on, like, to see the beauty in something, but also he was making them focus in on it, right? It's a permanent thing that he was created.
Hmm.
And what's coming up is, like, what you focus on is what you're going to get. So if you focus on the negative, you're going to get the negative. If you focus on the positive, you're going to focus on the positive. And it's almost like he gave you a vision board of life, right? If you have something
Yeah.
in your focus every day, you're going to strive toward that, and you may not even recognize that you're doing that. You're going to start taking small steps to make that actually come about, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's like people have to get that positive mindset, and there's a lot of things where people, compare themselves. I think the problem
Yeah.
was like what I see, like I live in a world in music where everybody wants to clone what was already done, and it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to actually do things original because everybody tells you, well, that's not going to work because you need to do what's been done before. And so the thing is that it's kind of a, goes round and round because the people that are willing to do something different, they get that thing that becomes the standard bearer, and then everybody else clones it.
Right.
And so
Right.
so it's like a lot of it is just copies of what an original, like a Beethoven or a Bach or a Hendrix or Jim Morrison, they're originals. And then you get people to kind of mimic it. And so
Yeah.
you have to be willing to take the failure, because a part of what being an artist is a lot of things you do are going to not work in the market or not going to be actually received well. And you have to get beyond the fact that not every piece is going to be received well. And some people can't get beyond that because they take it personal. So when they get that rejection, they can't handle it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's keeping up with the Joneses there too. That mindset of like, just because you don't have something um, similar doesn't mean that you're in a place of lack, right? I often like to think of the comparison game is really a killer of dreams, of joy. We all have our own journey to go down, and a lot of times it's like me trying to say I wish I didn't get cancer so that way I could go and not have to deal with being in early menopause and going through hormone replacement therapy and all this other stuff that I have going on when I'm in my mid 40s. And like I could look at other women my age and I'm like, oh, well, they don't have to go through that. Look how much easier their life is. When the whole time they're probably looking at me for something that they admire in me that I have no idea. And it's true
Yeah.
for everybody that we are all on our own journey and we all have our own gifts. And a lot of times, the best thing I've ever heard is like, just keep your blinders on and keep moving forward. Don't worry about what everybody else is doing. And the best example of that I think that we see in culture today, in society today, is Elon Musk, right? When he came out years ago, everybody thought he was insane. And now everybody is copying exactly what he's doing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just it's just the way society is, and like
Well,
they will.
genie, like, yeah, when you look at genius, you think about like Einstein. When they
Mhm.
measured him in school, he was getting D's. He was the
Yeah,
greatest physicist ever. So sometimes you're ahead of the curve, like, and people don't know how to measure you. I mean, that story was
yeah,
what, like with Hendrix, when he went into the studio, the recording engineers didn't know how to handle what he was putting out because it didn't sound like anything before. So they would
yeah,
go and try to edit out the feedback, edit out all the sounds that he was creating, because it's like they never heard those. They said, "Well, that's not proper. That's not right. That's not the right sound." It's like it was the right sound. So he had the presence of mind to say, sometimes I have to go on the board and actually keep that sound. So he
yeah,
actually used to force those sounds to get on the tape. And I think you have to be the kind of mindset, like, he was a young guy. He was like under 27 when he was doing that. In 66, he used to challenge the recording engineers and the producers and say, it needs to go down like that. And
yeah,
that's a hard thing to do, because a lot of times will tell you either somebody in a higher position, like a producer or your boss, or whatever, tells you this. And it's the people who make those really never been done before. That's how you get to the next level. But a lot of people put a lot of pressure to make that never happen, and you have to be willing to be yourself. And it's hard to
mhm,
be yourself because everybody wants you to clone something out. They clone whatever exists. But
yeah,
that's always been my kind of point of view. Is like, that you have to have some exceptions to the rule to move forward. You can't just be doing the same thing. I mean, I'm in IT,
yeah,
and how are we going to move forward if we kept on doing the same thing? We don't.
yeah. But but think of what a missing it was if Jimi Hendrix wasn't Jimi Hendrix, right? Like if his music never
It's
came to
hard.
be the
Yeah.
way, like with as a society we would have lost out on his greatness. And so many other
Yeah.
musicians came from what he created. Yeah. So it's
I mean,
really
catered
about
the
shine.
whole, like, rock. Yeah. I mean, rock and heavy metal genre, the idea that you can go lead guitar like that wasn't really a thing. The guitar
Right.
wasn't really used that way, and
Right.
so you change an instrument because the way a musician looks at the instrument, or you change the
Mhm.
way, Bach and Beethoven and Chopin, all the jazz guys from, like, you think about Coltrane or Davis or Sun Ra, they took approaches that weren't normal, and Davis got in trouble for creating fusion. And everybody said, well, it's not bebop. The bebop became the standard.
Mhm.
But then he chose to do something different than the standard.
Mhm.
And he was into that change in the standards all the time because he was kind of like one of these guys cutting edge. And when you try to challenge the standard, people will say, well, that's bad. That's not right. But that's what happens. Like the people who challenge the standard, that's how you get the progress.
Yeah.
Like Elon Musk, he challenged the industry on multiple places. Like when you challenge it, people will come at you. They'll be the
Yeah.
haters and say, "Well, what does he know?" It's like, what are you doing? But that's how you move forward.
Yeah. And that's why, like, when you have the opportunity as a person, right, we just have to shine our light. Don't ever let anybody tell you you can't, because you might be the person that actually changes the world.
Yeah, it is hard, to get the courage to do that. But I think like maybe with like if we talk about your website, so if somebody
Mhm.
goes to the link we have up and they set
Mhm.
up like an exploration session, maybe you can talk about
Mhm.
like at the taking the first step after people listening to us talk. Like if they come to you, what's like the first
Mhm.
thing you do with a new person coming to you?
Oh, I love this question. So yeah, we'll have a conversation like you and I are having right now. I'll learn, things about your listeners as to what's important to them. And we'll have a little mini coaching session where they can leave our call empowered in moving forward in an area of their life that is just not working as well as they want it to. And so we will work on that together. We will create something together. The calls are confidential. Nobody will know anything. Am a I stand firmly in the ICF code of ethics as a master's credentialed coach. It is something that I take very seriously. So they can come in and just be themselves, share themselves, and we will empower them to create a future for themselves that they may not even see that they is possible right now. And it's something that I love to do, and I provide this complimentary to your listeners today as a thank you for listening and for you having me on. And it's really something that I find, I have changed conversations with people have changed their lives in one session. I have to tell you that I had a woman who showed up one day who was contemplating, just ending her marriage. She wanted to quit her job. She's like, what is the point of me creating anything in my life? And after we literally, the first session, we got her well on her way. She came in for a second session, and now she literally sold her home, has a loving relationship with her husband, and is living on the Florida coast on a sailboat. And she is making money by having started a podcast who actually got picked up. And she is just really loving life. And it's like, it doesn't take a lot. It
Yeah, you
just
have.
literally takes somebody listening for your greatness. And that's what I love to do.
Well, that's awesome because I think that's like the thing I got into with podcasting was the potential to just reach so many people. And this was
Yeah.
even before the pandemic. And I started just because some guy came to me and said, "Oh, I want to talk about your music." He found me on SoundCloud, and we started talking. And I didn't even know what a podcast was.
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, what is this?" It's like, "Oh, it's like radio." And then I said, "Whoa, this is so cool." We ended up having that first podcast, and we did a podcast together for like 6 months. And then I went off, and he couldn't do it anymore, and I went off and did my own. And I just started paying it forward and say, "Hey, I'm just going to talk to any creative person I find on Instagram, and show them what I had done with this other guy." And it just started up building and building. And we were initially just all audio, and then as things changed, we got better and got better tools, and we were just reaching so many people now. And it was something I kind of fell into just because somebody asked me
Yeah.
to get into it. But then it kind of fit. It's like, well, I had never done anything like that, but it just felt good.
Yeah.
Sometimes you fall into something, somebody contacts you, and that person they contact me, the guy Rock Tunes out of New York, like I still thank him to this day because I would have never got into it. And he just randomly out of nowhere, I got this email saying, "Hey, wants to interview me," and you never know
Yeah.
when your opportunity is going to happen. But you could miss it if you're like, "Well, I can't do that." You
Yeah.
know, like an old version of me was like, "Well, I'm not going to do that. I can't go on the radio." But that the post cancer version was like, "Oh, I could do that. Let's
Yeah.
try that."
And here you are 8 years later, almost 8 years. You should
Yeah,
be very proud of yourself. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing. And,
yeah. Well, you
you
always
know,
build.
and what I was going to say was,
Yeah, you build up.
I
Over time.
think I cut off. Sorry about that, guys. But what I was going to say is you are the best example of you are you never know what's possible when you take that leap. But one thing's for certain is if you don't take the leap, you're never going to even see what's possible. Right? So I love the fact that you took a chance
Yeah, man.
and you
Yeah.
created this.
The thing is like over time, this has become something that eventually might be my day job. It's
Great.
been, I've been able to monetize it. I'm not going to get into that, but I've been able to do things I didn't even think. I was just doing it for fun, and
Yeah.
then I started suddenly it's actually bringing in some money, and that wasn't the point, but it
Yeah.
ended up being doing something didn't even expect. It wasn't something I planned out. And a lot of people, yeah, it's good to plan. It's good to have things, and I had other things going on, and then it just helped my music. It actually, what people would say, well, how can be having a podcast help push your music? Well, then people go check out my music because my music's out
Right.
there, and they said, well, who's this podcaster? And then he also has music. So it ended up being like a way to market myself without being direct about it. It just ends up
Yeah.
getting people into it. And so it was the kind of natural growth. 'Cause you get
Yeah.
fake kind of growth, but you get natural growth if you get yourself out there, you show up. It's just this
Yeah.
idea, like if you show up consistently and you start to build a following, then people are like, well, who's this Peg? And then suddenly, then you actually are out there. So it's like if you
Yeah.
just show up, a lot of it is like I think I've heard people say, I can't remember who first said it, but if you just show up, that's half the battle.
Yeah. In everything in life, right? By just showing up. And I've also learned that most of the time, the things that we do not want to do are the things that we should be doing because that's where our growth is going to happen for sure. So I loved this conversation. Thank you so much for having me. Really.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's just been really cool to do this. And I wanted to let everybody know, like, if you are not familiar with some of the platforms we're on, we're going to create a page that so wherever you like to listen or watch podcasts, I'll give that to you by tomorrow. You'll have that for your audience. But we're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and I'll send you the Facebook and YouTube links for your audience after my next podcast tonight. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's truly, truly a pleasure. And I loved our conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.